Today on the Passionate Pediatric Dentist Podcast.
You were supposed to, when you did your calculation for your 2.5 months worth of payroll, anyone who was on payroll for more than $100,000 a year had to be capped at $100,000 a year. And in the beginning, there was no guidance, and we said $100,000 a year divided by 12 months, that's $8,333.33 a month. And there has been some updated guidance on this. So regardless of what your business payroll frequency is, my personal bias when I'm coaching folks is to get everyone I can on a twice a month payroll instead of biweekly. However, for this guidance, the calculation that they laid out is biweekly. So they said, take your $100,000 and divide it by 26 pay periods a year. And so that gives you $3,846.15. And you're roughly going to have 2 pay periods per month. So we multiply that by 2. And the maximum monthly that is allocated from this forgivable PPP money per employee that made over $100,000, the maximum monthly is $7,692.30. That's the number, $7,692.30.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Passionate Pediatric Dentist. I am your host, Dr. Phil Slonkoski, and here we are with a PPP update. Now, how many of us have gotten PPP confused with PPE? I mean, seriously, how many conversations have you had with your office leadership where you're discussing both PPE and PPP status? It gets nuts. Now, this has been quite a controversial, confusing, frustrating topic to say the least, right? I know that for our office, the PPP has been huge for us. And as I record this now on June 2nd, we are anxiously awaiting to see what type of new legislation is going to be passed that will hopefully help us further in this current situation. Now, this podcast was recorded, I think, 2 weeks ago as a sort of update on the PPP, things that you need to be aware of, things that you need to be thinking of. And for most of the topics covered, regardless of what happens maybe in the near future, these are points that you need to take into consideration. Now, Chris Sands from Profi 2020 practically has an MBA in the PPP. And if you think about it, Profi has put itself out there as being an advocate and a huge partner with dentists and trying to do accounting right. So for them as a business, their ability to help us dentists navigate it is a kind of make or break moment for their business. Because I think for all different firms out there that offer consulting, accounting, legal, helping us during this time, we're not accountants. We're not lawyers, we're dentists. And some of us, by nature of our business acumen or the practices that we practice in, our time in practice, have at times had to become students of law, students of accounting. But at the end of the day, what we do day in and day out is not accounting, is not legal. So we have to rely on experts, people who we pay. And just as we expect that the work we do will be worth the money we ask of our patients, we expect our financial analysts, financial consultants, advisors, our practice consultants, our accountants, and our attorneys to deliver. Well, during this time, they need to deliver. They need to step up. And I hope that as each of you navigate this time, you are taking notes as to who is stepping up and who is not. Now, that is not by any means supposed to be an endorsement of Profi 2020 or anybody that I necessarily interview on this podcast. It is simply a refreshing reminder, I think, that we have a right to expect of the people whom we pay for their advice that it's good advice. And I think there is nothing like a crisis to sober us. And if changes need to be made in your legal and accounting department and consulting department, I would advise you to make those, because the future, though full of hope, may bring with it new challenges as our country, as our economy navigates a seismic shift in our culture. Now, it is my hope that in America we will sort through this as we have over the decades and the various challenges that we have faced as a nation. But I feel that there is a great deal of uncertainty, and there is nothing worse than bad advice during a time of uncertainty. So without further ado, here is Chris Sands presenting a very, what I think, thorough update on really what you need to know about the PPP. So take notes. If you have any questions, shoot us some emails. Chris will hopefully continue to be a regular on this podcast, because I believe now more than ever, we need to have very frank, real discussions about pediatric dentistry, dentistry and business concepts, to face the ever-evolving culture, the ever-evolving changing economy, and the ever-changing and evolving patient-based and parent-based. These are conversations that I think right now mean more to us, what I think is where we're going. Without further ado, here's Chris Sands giving you guys the update on the PPP. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Passionate Pediatric Dentist. We are recording this. Usually I don't say the dates, but I want to, we are in the middle of the COVID crisis, so I want to date this for all of history. It is currently May 15th, and I have Chris Sands on the phone for a deep dive in the PPP, something we have all become familiar with, not to be confused with PPE, which I do find slightly ironic. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Phil. It's good to be back.
Well, man, I think if there's one thing that's been in the forefront of all of our minds, now that we are opening up around the country and getting back into practice, we are still searching for PPE. Some of us can find it, some of us can't. But in the forefront of all of our minds is, what the heck is going on with this PPP? You and I have communicated a little bit about it, and I can't think of anybody better who's going to be able to articulate it. And so we're going to dive right into this, because people want to hear and understand this. So I'm going to just turn it over to you and say, what kind of update and what information do you want to share with us about what people need to know about the PPP loan right now?
Sure. So, I feel like at this point I have almost earned an MBA in PPP loans. From day one, when this was even being discussed as a bill, tried to get as much information as I can. As I think, today everyone is scrambling still to try to get information. And you and I have discussed that there's so much misinformation out there. A lot of questions, a lot of particulars or specific scenarios to businesses that they have questions around, and we don't have answers. And there has been the initial and kind of limited or developing guidance from the SBA, and that is the ultimate decision maker that will determine all of the answers to these questions and how this plays out. But it's still a little bit vague. There's supposed to be even new guidance, I believe, coming out today or tomorrow. And I'll try to go over as much of it as I can. But I would start with the base root fundamental requirement that everyone needs to know is that PPP stands for Paycheck. That's the first P, Paycheck Protection Program. And the government, you want to play a scenario for yourself in which so I'll for the purposes of this call, I'll pretend to be the government, and you're the business owner, and I'm the government. I'm giving you my money, which, by the way, I find ironic because it's the people's money. We paid it in taxes, but anyway, I'm the government, and I'm going to give you my money, and I will let this be free money if you do with it what I say and what I intend for you to do with it. And the number one purpose for this money is to restore the paychecks, to get the people off of unemployment. Now, this has not been put out in writing, but if you really pay attention, it looks to be predicted that the state unemployment systems are predicted to, at this rate, be bankrupt by around June 30th. That has already occurred in the state of California. The state of California system is bankrupt, and they were getting additional relief from the federal government. So this PPP program was created. The government realized, hey, all these small businesses are having to lay their people off, and they're going on the unemployment system. The states already didn't have enough money in their unemployment system to make this work. So there was a federal stimulus that was created. So most states are getting, or state unemployment systems are giving around anywhere from $300 to $350 a week. And then the federal additional stimulus provided to those states is $600 a week. And that can't last forever. And all these feelings around, some of our teammates, some of our employees are making more money on unemployment than they were working here. That can be true, and they have to know, you have to know as a business owner, that's not going to last forever. One way or the other, they're going to come off unemployment. As soon as these business owners are receiving this PPP money, here again is one of the linchpin, fundamental rule. You must reestablish 75% of your payroll picture. And there are two dates that are so specific to look at. Number one is February 15th. That is the date that's going to be used as the benchmark to look back to see what was your payroll picture. How many people were there? What were they all paid? What was the total monthly payroll amount? The second benchmark date or review date is going to be June 30th. They're going to choose that date to say, how do those two dates compare in the payroll picture? And the rule number one that is clear is that they want 75% of that payroll picture reestablished. The part of that is not 100% clear, but I'll give you my opinion on it, is that we don't know. We've had questions around, does that mean 75% of the people? Does that mean 75% of the total dollars spent? Can I rehire 100% of the people and pay them at a reduced wage and still hit that 75% qualification? The black and white answer is we didn't get any clarification beyond you just have to reestablish 75% of the picture. My answer is to err on the side of caution, that what they really want is 75% of the people. And if you reestablish 75% of the people, you have a very good chance that you're going to reestablish 75% of the payroll picture.
Yeah. Would you agree that for people that are thinking that this is an opportunity to play with their numbers, this is not the time to do that? That what they're going to be looking for is going to be continuity between the February 15th date and the June 30th date.
That's correct. This is not a time to get creative and think, hey, how can I take this free money and reposition, put my company, myself in a better position from the people standpoint or financial standpoint. This money is about making the business whole, and again, about bringing the people back on payroll. And one of the tough parts to swallow is that, all of us are in different parts of the country, and we're in states that are opening up in different stages, and we all have the same dates applied as of current. They haven't changed these dates yet. They still could modify them, but some practices are still not allowed to be open. And they may have received their PPP funds, and they're like, well, how do I use this and get it forgiven? Because the other piece is there's an 8-week time clock. This further complicates things. So you may have gotten your money on, let's say, April 23rd. And from April 23rd, that may, take you to a date of, somewhere around, June 18th, let's say. I believe that's 8 weeks. Don't quote me on the total 8 weeks, but 8 weeks after April 23rd, it doesn't get you all the way to June 30th. You have to use your money up, or you have to, use those funds correctly by the end of that 8-week period. And still, they're going to review June 30th to see if you reestablished and maintained that payroll. Okay. The problem this poses is I'm the government. It's not your money. It's my money. I'm giving it to you. If you use it the way I want, it'll be free. I don't care if you can't open your company yet and your people are staying at home and either working from home or just staying at home and you pay them using my money, the only way it's getting forgiven is if those people get off of payroll, off of unemployment. Okay, so even if they have to sit at home and do nothing, they're taking this stimulus money versus bankrupting the unemployment system. One way or the other, they're coming off of payroll by that June 30th. If you offer them their job back and they refuse, you are supposed to report that to your state unemployment office. They will come off of unemployment. If that happens, then that we will also, as the government, as part of these rules, this has been a clarification recently, we will deduct that person from your total number of employees that you have to reestablish. So it will not be held against you in terms of you reestablishing the 75%. Is this an opportunity for some businesses to say there are certain team members that were not the greatest team players that they may not bring back? Yes, it is an opportunity there, but that's not how that may be a byproduct of what's happening. That's not how you want to utilize these funds to strategically not rehire people and rehire people in their place. There's another question. I have an employee who I'm not bringing back, or I have an employee who didn't want to come back. I have found someone else who did not have a job elsewhere, and I'm trying to rehire them now. I'm trying to hire them for the first time for my company. Will that get counted toward this loan? The official answer is we don't know. There's nothing in writing that says it will. But I like to think that when this all gets cleared up, that they will give credit to those businesses, because that's one more person that got a job and did not have to be on unemployment. How will this all be proven? Well, in applying for the PPP loans, most banks, so first of all, again, this is going through the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and it's being controlled and filtered through the banking system. And so your official guidance, your official place to get answers is actually your bank, your banker that you got this loan through. These loans, if they are not forgiven, they convert into a 1% loan. Okay, it's a 2-year term. Really, it's the first 6 months of no payments, and then it converts into an 18-month term of whatever wasn't forgiven, and it's at 1%. These banks do not want that to happen. They cannot service. It costs them more to service these loans than what they can make on the 1%. So your banker is your ally. They want to help this loan get forgiven. So you want to ask them the rules, ask them those specific questions, and ask how they plan on checking this. One of the most recent clarifications that came out, and this was a huge, more of a fear for most people, was there began to be rumblings about what if you took this money and you possibly had other resources that you could have tapped, whether that be your personal money, whether that be other business lines of credit, or could you qualify for another business loan with the bank. They're going to be looking at this. Well, if you had other resources, the way it was originally written, you attested that you had exhausted those resources, and this might have been an out, for the SBA to say, hey, wait, you could have gotten money somewhere else. You shouldn't have taken this, and we're going to not forgive it, which would spell big trouble for small businesses. And they came out with new clarification. They're not going to scrutinize loans under $2 million. So that is going to apply for the big companies that took $2 million or more, but all of your small businesses that mostly took less than $2 million, they're not going to heavily scrutinize that. And it's just, hey, play by the rules of the loan. And the banks are slowly getting more and more information from the SBA. Some of the information is, the SBA putting it out publicly on their website or through the Treasury website. Everyone should, and periodically, I once a week at least will go to Google and I'll type in, Treasury, PPP, FAQ, frequently asked questions. And there's an update there's a document that they're keeping updated, and they update it once or twice a week, at least. And with any new frequently asked questions and how the SBA is interpreting that information continues to come out, and the banks So we can receive that, the public can receive that, but the banks are also getting direct communication. And as the business owner who took this money, you have to just stay on top of it with your bank on what's going to be acceptable or not. Let's see. What are some of the other questions you're hearing, Phil?
Let me ask you this question. Everything you're saying so far totally jives with what our perspective has been. One of the concerns that has come up is, as you were saying, the local banks are going to be your ally. And by SBA utilizing the smaller local banks, though, they did put there's a lot of delegation in that regard. So what's to keep my bank from saying, yeah, you followed all the guidelines, and when they shoot it up to SBA says, no, you didn't?
As of right now, we don't have an answer for that, but I forget the number. I mean, there was a crazy number of loans, millions of actual loans given out. Okay. The SBA by itself does not have the bandwidth to go and audit each one of these loans one by one.
Right.
There might be some random selection, but they're mostly going to be looking at the bigger loans. They're holding the banks accountable to kind of on the front end, audit each of these loans and was the money used properly. So let's go back to, I think it's important to say, what's the requirements on the back end of this going to look like? In the beginning, you had to get maybe a full 2019 payroll picture to help you calculate the 2.5 months worth of average payroll. On the back end of this, I think they're going to ask you for, a full year at whatever point. If they ask for it here in 2020, at whatever point they ask for it, they're going to ask for a full year-to-date payroll report to see every month. They're going to look at February 15th. They're going to look at June 30th. They're also going to ask for financials, most likely. Okay, the payroll report is more official than your financials are, but they will ask for financials and maybe some supporting documentation on payments made. Again, either to the payroll company or some of the other forgivable amounts include, you can use no more than 25% of the loan on non-payroll. So that's the things that are covered are essentially rent and utilities. When they get all of this information, your bank is going to, kind of like re-underwrite in a way this loan and did you use it properly? And I think they're the ones that are going to have to give that stamp of approval that you used it properly. It's our assessment that this should be forgiven, and then they're going to pass it on to the SBA. And those are going to flood in, millions at a time. And who knows how long it's going to take for the SBA to then, fully approve it as forgiven. But suffice it to say, your accounting and your record keeping is paramount at this time. The paper trail, the electronic paper trail is paramount. Make sure that you've put this money into a separate account. If possible, if you have a separate account for payroll, put either all of the money or at least 75% of it into that payroll account and let your payroll be drafted from there. Try not to commingle it too much and if it is all in just one account, if you only have one business account, make sure you just have good transactions and record keeping of how you're using it. In addition to this, separate. Real quick. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to interrupt you here because I think you make a really good point, and this is something I just wanted to echo while you said it. So it's fresh on people's minds. It's really important that you put that in a separate account. And, you and I did a great podcast that's been published on the Passionate Pediatric Dentist about setting up different accounts and cash flow management for your office. We talked about 7 to 9 different accounts that you should set up to make sure that you move your money. And, for people who are listening that only have like 1, if not 2 accounts for their business, you do not put this money in that account.
Yeah, it's, you don't want to give the government, the SBA, your bank, you want to give them as little excuse as possible. And you don't want to give them any outs that you may have used this money incorrectly. So keeping it totally separate there's a huge advantage to that.
So sorry I cut you off, man. You can get back to rolling there. You keep rolling.
That's okay. So the other thing that's important that we're not fully certain on yet is most practices are going to have an increased expense of the new PPE, right? Costs. So all of your additional masks and gowns and gloves and air purifiers and anything that you're purchasing or putting into your office space, do yourself a favor and keep very close track of that stuff. We're not for certain yet, but hopefully there are some tax breaks in the future on some of this. Every business is going to experience some additional cost, and there's a lot of pressure being put on the IRS. That pressure being put on the IRS started relating to this PPP money. Again, take the stance of, in this conversation, I'm the government. I'm giving you this money. It's going to be free to you. So it's not your money. Therefore, it wasn't your expense. So if you used my money, my free money that I gave you to pay your employees, right now, as it's written, the stance is you do not get a write-off. You do not get to deduct the payroll costs. Okay? That payroll, normally, any business is paying their payroll and payroll taxes and all of that, and they get to write all of that off. Well, because it's free money from the government, they're saying you don't get to write that off. And logically, it makes sense. However, emotionally, and it's kind of a punch to the gut of Americans that, hey, give us it's a tiny thing. You're only giving us 2 months worth of money. Give us, 2 months of write-off of that money too. Just to help. It's not more cash to us. It's just on the back end, it helps the business retain any cash that's able to, bring back once it recovers. So that's how it stands right now. There is an immense amount of pressure from Congress on the IRS, because the IRS, they interpret the law, and that's the way they interpreted it so far. Congress is really pushing to allow the businesses to be able to deduct that anyway. We'll see what happens. So stand by.
Well, that's a second thing that people really got to pay attention to, because I don't think the vast majority, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the vast majority of dentists understand what you just said, that the current way that the law is written. And the thing is this is tax 101. So it's not as if they did something wrong. This money would not be naturally deducted.
Let me be crystal clear on it. So the business is not going, it's not going to count as revenue to the business. It's not going to increase, taxable revenue or taxable profit. It's just the fact that, like, let's just pretend that 100% of the loan got forgiven, so all the money was free, and you had used this money on your employees to pay them. If it was your money, if it was the business owner's money in the normal time, let's go back and look at January. Back in January of this year, when you paid your team's payroll, all your employees' payroll, that was an expense of the business. You got to write it off. Now you're using the government's money to pay that payroll. So they're saying you don't get to write it off. On the 2 months that you use the government's money, you don't get to expense it those 2 months, because it wasn't your money in the first place. Okay? And again, logically, it makes sense because they're not counting it as new revenue. They're not allowing you to expense it. Logically, normal thinking by the code, that makes sense. It's fair. However, it's just tough that in a year of down revenue as it is, we can use every break we could get.
Right.
And so if as an additional reward, it'd be nice if they would just allow the business owner to still deduct that payroll.
Right. But what people have to plan for, at least currently, and we're hopeful that it's going to change, but if it doesn't, they're going to need to plan for a certain amount of tax on that income that they might not have otherwise had to plan for.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And if, again, and it could be a sizable amount for someone if they're not, paying attention. So it's just another thing I think I just wanted to highlight, that in people's minds, at least the way my mind operates, is I'm already trying to think about what taxes are going to be looking at like next year, so I can manage my cash flow better, especially during this recovery period. Because I feel like, as you said earlier, people are spending a lot of money to up their offices. And the funny thing is that money that they're using to increase their, the safety in their office is almost comparable to what they're going to what they would almost hypothetically have to pay in taxes for the money that was given to them by the government. Now,
Yep.
so hopefully, and this is, one of the times where whether your opinion on organized dentistry is positive or negative, if they are lobbying really hard, and hopefully the harder they lobby, there'll be some sort of give or take. But, the reality is that the way that the law is written, it's kind of, that's the way it is. And like you said, the IRS is just interpreting what the law is saying. But hopefully this is one of those times where the organized dentistry and the ADA and all that will actually come through with us on a big win. It would be a big win if we can write that stuff off.
It sure would. It sure would. Phil, there's been a large portion of people who have asked me questions around compensation for their doctors, associate doctors. And there's been some confusion, I think, in the way that people are interpreting what's covered in the PPP loan and how you explain that back to those doctors. So, our doctors were all impacted greatly by this. They were laid off just like every other employee. And most of them, because of their normal income levels, were not eligible for any federal stimulus or anything like that. They may have gotten unemployment, but that was, they're definitely percentage-wise greatly impacted. And they have questions around when they come back. And I think maybe for a different call, we can talk about, compensation arrangements and how those were terminated during any kind of layoff and how they may have been changed in bringing someone back, and some of that's temporary and some of that needs to be permanent. But one of the things I found that people are finding to be confusing is this the portion that is covered or forgiven by the PPP loan. So when you were supposed to, when you did your calculation for your 2.5 months worth of payroll, anyone who was on payroll for more than $100,000 a year had to be capped at $100,000 a year. And in the beginning, there was no guidance, and we said it's $100,000 a year divided by 12 months. That's $8,333.33 a month. And there has been some updated guidance on this. So regardless of what your business payroll frequency is, my personal bias when I'm coaching folks is to get everyone I can on a twice a month payroll instead of biweekly. However, for this guidance, the calculation that they laid out is biweekly. So they said, take your $100,000 and divide it by 26 pay periods a year. And so that gives you $3,846.15. And you're roughly going to have 2 pay periods per month. So we multiply that by 2. And the maximum monthly that is allocated from this forgivable PPP money per employee that made over $100,000, the maximum monthly is $7,692.30. That's the number, $7,692.30. Some people have gotten confused on this. So that's the number that basically they really wanted used for the calculation. Okay. And if you've already received your money and you use the old 8333, don't worry about it. Okay. Don't worry about that at all. But in the calculation of when they go back to say, did you use the money properly and allocate it? They're only allowing the use of those funds to cap out on those employees at $76.92.30 per month. Some people have misinterpreted that in the way that they're speaking to their doctors as they're rehiring them. They're saying, all I can pay you as an associate doctor, I'm bringing you back. All I can pay you is a maximum of $7,692.30 a month. And that's, some doctors are like, well, I can't even cover my own bills on being paid that coming back full time. It doesn't make logical financial sense. How do I do that? Well, that was a misspoken in the way that was delivered. Okay. The way it should be delivered is this $76.92 per month is like the base guarantee that you can pay an associate to come back. They may be coming back part-time, full-time, or, they may be coming back full-time, but there's not enough patient flow, or there's not enough because we're having to spread people out, because we're having to, we have takes longer to turn over a chair because of all the healthcare precautions. We see less total patients. So they may not be able to produce / collect at that high enough level to cover the 7692. At bare minimum, for those 2 months, they're going to get the 7692. But if they did generate enough in collections based on their comp, let's say that they generated enough to make $10,000 that month, they get paid $10,000. 7692 is covered by the PPP funds, and the practice collected the difference and pays them the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically the practice would net around $7,000, and because you would be taking that out of the PPP, and then you pay the additional $3,000 from what they collected.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I found, now it started to become alarming how many people are I guess they're just misspeaking. They're not doing it intentionally, but they're thinking about it the wrong way or misspeaking to these associate doctors. And the doctors are like, well, why would I come back? It doesn't make sense. Like it's a fraction of what I used to make. If the work is there, if the patient flow is there, and you're allowed to see them, and you're allowed to do that work, and you can collect on it, you as the business are covered for at least that 7692 per doctor. And that's like the base guarantee that they can make during this time. And, I'll say this, everybody really should be kind of bringing people back. And again, this is a topic maybe for another entire call, but they should be bringing people back, or doctors back, with the understanding that, we had to terminate the previous arrangement. It was intended to be a temporary termination, and we're bringing you back, and it's bringing you back probably under some sort of new financial arrangement. And this is intended to be a temporary financial arrangement. And don't lose sight of the long term. I think there are some associate doctors who are being a little bit unfair and thinking, hey, my contract says I get this per day guaranteed, or I get this per month guaranteed, or this is my payout. Well, that is in normal collections times. We are not in normal times yet. Okay, we are still in the recovery. And for the sake of everyone, maintaining their jobs and maintaining relationships and practices to serve the patients, we kind of all have to bend a little bit and understand nobody is getting paid a full wage compensation like they used to be. None of the employees really are. None of the owners are. The revenue is not where it is. At most, some practices are coming back to me and saying they're starting to see their 70 to 80% collection. That's a good sign. This is the very beginning. Some of the earliest practices that, reopened to normal procedures, in late April, early May. So everybody needs to keep that in mind.
Yeah. It's been interesting as I've kind of tracked our numbers for just the 2 weeks here. Our operative has actually been really great. If we had the hygiene on it, we'd be humming. Although I think the question that a lot of us I think are going to be, how long is it going to take the insurance companies to reimburse us, right? Like, when are we actually going to see the collections coming in? Is it going to be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, right? Because, they furloughed or have people working remotely. How quick are they going to get to claims? I think the fee for service practices are going to, in some ways, be a little bit better off in that department. What's your advice to manage the situation where a practice presumed that the 833 is what people were going to get paid and paid that out, and in reality, it should have been the 7692 when it comes time to reconcile all this? If at least 75% of the total money received was used on payroll to restore payroll, and you brought back 75% of your people, if you made that mistake of paying 83.33 versus the 79.62, don't worry about it. It's most likely, those are fractional, tiny dollars. It's most likely that's going to get forgiven. The point is, you're not doing anything intentionally to try to cheat the system. You're not trying to come out better. You're not trying to prosper from this terrible event. There's going to be mistakes made, and I think, banks are going to provide a little bit of additional guidance on that. And there's going to be some tiny leeway. And, if you were showing that you really did try to use the money only for payroll, some maybe for rent, some for utilities, then all that got used properly should be forgiven if you hit those
those key points. And, be smart about this. The first intention, like you want to know the rules, but the first intention should not be, I need to do everything it takes to have this money forgiven. The first intention is be smart about, what does the business need to reopen and survive? And if for some reason you don't use all of the money correctly, if you did the best you could to try to hit the, bringing back 75% of the people, and let's say you used half the money doing that, that portion, that half that was used correctly, as it stands right now, it's assumed that based on how everything was written, that portion should be forgiven. And the portion that you either did not use, or if you used it on something else, if you didn't use it, you have the option to give the money back. There's no prepayment penalty. Okay. Or you can convert it into that loan. And let me give this piece of advice. You should be running some scenarios. You should look based on the day you received the money. You should take a calendar out and mark all the dates that you'll be running payrolls between the day you received the money all the way to June 30th. And you should maybe keep a note of when you brought who back and when you hit your 75% picture, and predict for the payrolls you haven't run yet, predict what those payrolls will be and run the scenario to see, how much of the money would you use up? Did you use 75% of it on the paychecks? And then any amount that you think might be left over, go online and find a loan amortization calculator. I like the one on bankrate.com. So you can just go to Google and type in Bankrate loan amortization calculator. Put in the leftover amount. Let's just say it's $50,000, and put it on 18 months term, 1.5 years at 1%, and hit calculate, and it'll tell you the monthly payment. And you have to self-assess. Can you afford that monthly payment? Just giving that money back at that monthly payment rate, or do you want to just give it all back so you don't have that payment? I have had a lot of people trying to get creative with, can I use this 1% money to, refinance something else? No, that's not the intent. Technically, once it's unforgiven, you can kind of use it for whatever you want, but you need to do the math, because that's why it's a 2-year or 18-month term, is because the payment is likely going to be so high that it's not a better deal for you to refinance something else. Let me also say this. Some people are getting the EIDL, EIDL loan, the Emergency Disaster Relief Loan. And that one comes with way less restrictions. It does not have anything to do with the paychecks. You can use it on almost anything you want. None of it is going to be forgiven. It's a 30-year term, 3.75%. And the only thing they've said that you cannot do with it is try to use that to refinance some other existing debt. When I say existing debt, that means an existing term loan. People have asked me, does that mean I can't pay off credit cards? I can't pay off a line of credit? No, you're allowed to do that, because those were just revolving debts that you were floating during this time to survive. So if you had expenses on your credit card, you can use this money to pay down that credit card, but it's intended for you to, it was really intended to give you working capital if you had to have it. Yeah. And some people were lucky enough to get it, and a lot were not.
Because that rate's going to be better than a line of credit necessarily, through an existing bank. So that would actually,
correct.
That would actually have been, really nice. Cool, man. Well, here, as we kind of wrap this up, because I think you definitely hit all the high points that I was really curious, because you and I didn't really kind of break this down before we talked, and I kind of wanted to come at it from the standpoint of the lay person who's kind of been following the stuff you guys have been putting out, the conversations I've been in, and I wanted to kind of give you an open forum to kind of share what you thought were the most important points. And I'm happy to say that you hit all of them, and I am really glad that you guys are out there hitting this, because I feel like it's no different than the PPE stuff. There's different opinions, different interpretation. People are throwing stuff out there, but you guys work with hundreds of offices. This is your niche. This is, in some ways, Chris, this is like one of these make or break moments for you and your business, isn't it? Like, you get your clients through this journey. You're going to have loyal guys for life, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. We took it as, when this was happening, it scared me probably more up front than most doctors realized it. More than we were made aware and kind of alerted about it in February, and that's when it became a serious deal to us. And it hadn't even hit all of our clients. We serve our clients, to serve our community, and not just our clients. Anyone and everyone, anyone listening to this call, we've said from day one, if you need information, you need help, and you're not getting it from your current accounting relationship, you're not hearing it from your bank. If you'd like some guidance, we've offered to do free consultations and discussions around this for free to help dentistry survive through this. And it's like a badge of honor, honestly, to be able to serve the specialty that has given so much to us and be able to give back to them through this period and see them survive through it. I came out early and said I believe this was going to be a 2 to 4 month ordeal, and a lot of people thought I was crazy. Some people thought that they agreed, and we're approaching that point of we're in the third of this, and probably likely we'll enter the fourth. Yes, more than ever, it has impacted a lot of people that we didn't know or touch before, and we're very, very blessed to be able to serve more people, and more people sign up to work with us. So that's a blessing. But that's just a byproduct. It's about saving this industry and getting it back up on its feet. And I have no doubt it will be. Will it be a different world? Yes, but you know what? This has happened before. If you ask a lot of older doctors, before HIV became a thing, they didn't even wear gloves and masks. And that became the new standard. And now dentistry may look a little bit different after this. I think there's going to be some reactionary regulation and then some new, kind of permanent regulation. So we'll see what it looks like, but we will deal with it as it comes, and we will persevere through it. So everybody needs to keep fighting the good fight.
Well said. That is a great way to kind of conclude that. And I definitely want to echo that. I think the work that you guys are doing is fantastic. And I'll put as we usually wrap this up, why don't you give a preview of what we will talk about next time when we connect?
There's a lot of lessons to be learned from this event. One of the biggest ones for any business is that there are too many businesses that could not make it 1 month without revenue. And if you think it's sound financial advice on a personal level to have 3 to 6 months of emergency savings set aside, you need to have that same belief system inside your business. And it should be every business owner's goal, no matter what industry they're in. On the other side of this, the lesson to take away from this catastrophe is that you need to have 3 to 6 months of business expenses saved up and left in cash in the business at all times. And that's going to take time to build. It's going to be a lot of work, and it's something we have to do. I think the other thing is that, it is paramount that the reason for a business to be in business, and the only purpose, or the reason that a business stays in business, is it must be profitable. And those that were struggling with profit before this event, they're being decimated. Those that were profitable before, they had the ability to, cut expenses further and not be as impacted as much. And one of the components to that profitability that needs to be addressed is all compensation arrangements. And primarily with our doctors, it's been the wild, wild west in dentistry. Everyone's paying everybody differently. There's nothing consistent. And there's no formula. People aren't using any kind of economic formula to determine, what is a win-win-win, a win for the business, a win for the employee, and a win for the owner, that's profitable all the way around. And that's going to create, I think, one of the bigger ripple effects as things return back to normal. I think dentistry has its eyes opened now to see maybe we were not in the smartest arrangements. That has to be addressed. So those are a couple items I think we can go through, and they all kind of run hand in hand. Being smarter business owners, knowing your numbers, it's always been preached. Well, now it showed itself. Eliminating the debt, all those concepts. Some of those we've covered before, but they're more important now. I think there's been an awakening, and thank goodness. We need to really ride that wave and improve the state of business within dentistry.
Oh, precisely. In order to survive and thrive for this, it's going to take hard conversations, which I know you're not afraid to have. And I think those topics you laid out are just spot on. So, Chris, as always, these conversations are beyond illuminating, and I can't thank you enough for your time and everything you're doing for our profession. So thank you, my friend, and I look forward to continuing this the next time we connect.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Passionate Pediatric Dentist. If you took away one pearl, one nugget that's helping you practice better with more confidence, then we've done our job. And if you can, please leave us a review, leave us a comment. It would mean the world to us. Now, this podcast was brought to you by Pediatric Dental Directions. And if you want to join a group of like-minded pediatric dentists who share the same mission and vision as you, as what we try to embody in this podcast, then please check us out at www.pddx.us. We have a lot of information. We run a few courses, and we would love for you to check us out and be a part of that if you feel that we can be of help, be of value in your journey in pediatric dentistry. And as always, shoot us an email, ask us questions, and we would be happy to answer them either directly or maybe it's going to be a topic we can put for a podcast. But either way, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, anything worth doing is worth doing well and to the best of your ability. And we are here to support one another. That is the goal of the Passionate Pediatric Dentist. And again, we thank you for joining us. Until next time, take care.